Yeah, so welcome everyone. Is this on? I don't know if I need it. Is it? Can you hear me? Amber, can you hear me back there? There in that process. Now I bet you can hear me. Yeah. Good morning. I'm Kathy Newcomer. I am the director of the Trachtenberg School of Public Policy and Public Administration here at the George Washington University. And I welcome you to the George Washington University campus here in our student center. And I congratulate you on making it here through the rain and the bad commutes and the late transportation. So you guys are really the really brave and determined folks to get here. Thank you very much. As you know, we've been having our grants management breakfasts to basically provide opportunity for a community of practice in the grants management community to learn from others. And so here we are again to learn from someone who has a lot of grants management experience and a lot on his plate in terms of grants management at the HHS. The Trachtenberg School is a graduate school. We have Masters of Public Administration, Master of Public Policy, PhD in Public Policy Administration. So if you want to know about any of our degrees, I'm here. I'll be here after the conversation. And I would just like to say that we are very happy to be partnering with REI because grants management is a huge area for government. And there are people that who work in this from a variety of different arenas, whether it's a programmatic design, the evaluation, the administration. There's a lot of people that not only work in grants management, but grants touch a lot of Americans. It's a huge part of the budget, over $635 billion of the federal budget, and so it's a big thing. And people need to pay attention, and we need to always continually figure out how we can do it more effectively and more efficiently. So we are delighted to work with REI that's actually in the business of grants management to make this happen. So welcome. Welcome on behalf of GW, and I'm going to hand over to my colleague Jeff Meyer from REI, who's going to also welcome you and introduce the speaker. Thank you very much for being here, and thank you for those who are being live streamed. You didn't have to come out in the rain, but we're glad that you're here as well.
We really appreciate George Washington University hosting this as well. So for those of you who've been reading the news this past week, grants actually seem to be becoming more and more prominent in the federal arena, and there are a couple of reasons for that. Clearly in President Trump's budget proposals, grants are becoming higher stakes. If agencies have found significant results, they get funded, and perhaps they even get an increase in funding. And if they have not achieved results through their grantees, they don't just get a minor reduction, they get eliminated or proposed for elimination. We'll see how far that goes. The other thing that I think is quite interesting, though, is there is a stronger expectation that grants be used well and that grants be made efficiently. And I suspect there will be a stronger attention. In fact, there's a person from OMB in the room. I won't point the person out, but those of you who've been talking with each other may find them. I think OMB will be more interested in both risk topics, about whether or not we're appropriately gathering and understanding risk information about grantees, but also I suspect as well efficiency topics. How efficiently are we making grants on a timely basis and with minimal administrative cost? And actually this is part of the purpose, in fact the primary purpose of these sessions, so that you in the grant making community have a chance to get to know each other and to share ideas and to take lessons and questions to each other and to kind of learn from each other. And that gives me great pleasure to be able to not only recognize that Jeff Johnson is here to share some ideas about that, but a number of new folks are in the room and in the audience, some of them online. So we have some folks who are interested in joining the community from the National Institutes of Health, from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, from the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, from the Department of Veterans Affairs, from the, I think NASA, some folks from NASA have registered and may be online for the first time. So I'm hoping that you'll take a chance to get to know some of the new colleagues that are here, if you have not already. One of the other things I point out is, although we didn't make enough, we weren't sure everybody was interested, there are several articles that address kind of both President Trump's budget's effects on grant making in the back of the room at the registration table. Another that suggests here kind of 5 things to do to improve grant making over the next several years. And one of those suggestions is kind of more rigorously share information about grantee and grantee risk across agencies. And the example I was speaking about with a couple of folks here beforehand was, you know what? The National Institutes of Health grants money to universities for one purpose. The Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute does as well. What do you know, so does the National Science Foundation. And a better ability to share experience might say, hey, you know what, this grantee has these terrific strengths, but a couple of real serious weaknesses. Clearly one agency is going to learn about those first and earlier. And the ability to share information across agencies, we think, may help strengthen everybody's ability to make grants effectively and achieve your mission outcomes. Let me give you just kind of a quick 30-second overview of REI. REI helps both build systems and improve processes for grant making and gather data from across government agencies to be able to provide them where there's an interest in transparency as well. So we, for example, help create and operate data.gov in addition to grant making systems for a large number of federal agencies. And recently, if you have not learned about it, REI is also offering an off-the-shelf software package as a service for grant-making organizations. For example, the states of Ohio and Rhode Island and Utah have each decided that they would like to use that kind of on an as-a-service basis. Certainly, I can answer more questions or even arrange a demo for any of you if you would like. But be that all as it may, again, I'm pleased to introduce Jeff Johnson, the Associate Deputy Assistant Secretary for HHS Division of Grants. He has responsibility for helping formulate grant policy and overseeing it. And if you're not aware, HHS is far and away the largest grant-making entity in the federal government. So what HHS kind of suggests often tends to set trends for other folks in government. I was kind of entertained because Jeff, after a career both with the Department of State and a couple of other organizations, joined HHS. He told me in order to work with Amy Hazeltine, who was his predecessor. And I don't know exactly what it is about you, Jeff, but apparently she left just after you joined.
Just before I joined.
And I'm sorry, just before you joined. But then at that point, the department decided that Jeff was probably up to the job, and so invited Jeff to take on Amy's responsibilities as Amy moved over to SAMHSA, I think it was at that point. So he has spent much of his youth living in England. If you want to talk to him, ask him if he can talk in an English accent. Who knows whether or not maybe he could try that. And is a graduate of the University of Maryland, so I'm sorry, a competitor apparently to George Washington University. And he's going to talk a little bit about grants guidance and successes at HHS across the past couple of years. Let me make one last request, actually 2 last requests. One is, asking questions. I think these are always much more interesting if there's a little bit of dialogue going on. I think some of the ones that I've found the most intriguing have been where audience members occasionally answer questions that other audience members ask or even the presenter asks. So this is intended to be a dialogue. The second request I would make is that if you think there is a particular topic that you would like to hear in a future event, please let us know. We've had in the past folks who have addressed how to do competitive grants well, how to do block grants efficiently, how to think about risk for an individual with respect to individual grantee selection. We've had folks from OMB talk about grants policy. So if there's a particular topic or area, or if you'd like to volunteer as a speaker, please let either Kathy or myself know. And with that, Jeff, thank you very much for coming and agreeing to speak with us.
Good morning. I hope that you don't ask any questions. No, just kidding. Please feel free to ask questions anytime. Just raise your hand. First, today is May 25th. Does anybody know what happened today about 56 years ago? All right, well, so it was actually when John F. Kennedy gave his Man Up to the Moon speech to Congress, where he said, hey, let's move our nation forward and set a goal for ourselves. And that set a tone for the future of NASA and invention across the government. Very similar, couple of years ago, we did the same thing, didn't we, with grants management? We said, let's change the way that we do grants. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, about the process that we went through in developing these new regulations, talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we see and some of the successes we've seen from the 2 CFR 200 being implemented, and then I'll talk a little bit about some of the things I think we'd like to see in the future. But I had a couple quotes up here. One, I think is really important to remember, especially as grants administrators, if you're on the government side, we are not the doers. We don't actually carry out the programs, right? We are the funders of these grant programs. And our role is not to change the world, it's to make grants that help others change the world. So we set up the structure for doing that. So our unique contribution as grant makers, how we make grants, must be just as strategic, just as focused on outcomes as anything else we do. And so that leads to 2 areas that we talk about within grant making. One is meeting the goals and objectives of programs. That is one of our major objectives, right? And setting strong objectives. The other is being good stewards of the federal funds. And so that is all grant making is. And we need to balance those 2 things. Also, from NIH came a quote saying, "You will decrease your stress level and have more time to focus on the program if you take the time to understand the grant process." There's, within government, there's some issues between program offices and the grants office, and what is administration of those grants and how do we process those better. So I'm in the Division of Grants at HHS. Been there for about 1.5 years now. And my division, just quickly, does grants regulations, policy training, reporting, grants oversight and evaluation. We have grants management systems and coordination, and I'm the managing partner of grants.gov. So if you have any concerns, comments, questions about grants.gov, please feel free to ask me. I also have a couple of my staff here I'd just like to recognize. If you guys could just stand up real quickly, or raise your hands. They've been intimately involved in the development of these regulations and support of the department's move towards a more uniform approach to grant making. So one of the offices is OGPO, which does all the policy, and a small team, but a strong team, and a well-versed team that is dedicated to improving the processes at the department. We have TAGS, which is our Tracking, Accountability, and Government Grant Systems, which if you go to their website, which I have here, they have all the grants information about our programs. They also provide all the information to USA Spending to meet the Data Act requirements and the Transparency Act. And then there's grants.gov. And I just wanted to give you a couple stats about grants.gov to understand what grants.gov is and the usage of grants.gov. There's 6.5 million visitors in 2016 to grants.gov. There's millions of searches per month. About 250,000 applications currently go through the system. We know that other systems do accept applications. We still have some manual applications being submitted, but 250,000 of those go through grants.gov. And they provide information through faceted searches on about 1,000 grant programs. And there's about 4,700 grant opportunities that are posted, worth about $100 billion in 2015, and about 10,000 phone calls a month through the call center. That's a tremendous amount of volume going through grants.gov, and we're going through a process now of modernizing the system to improve some of the functionalities of the system, but also to better coordinate with other systems such as SAN.gov or the IE processes at GSA. So let me tell you a quick little story, because that's what I do. And it's usually about my family, and so my brother lives overseas, and he's married to a Spanish woman, and they have a son, my nephew, Anico, who's born in England on St. Patrick's Day to a Spanish Basque mother and an American English father. So he's truly an international child. He covers all the bases. So they were over here visiting us a couple of years ago, and Anico was in the backyard playing baseball. And he was throwing the ball up and swinging and missing, swinging and missing, swinging and missing. He did this several times, and my brother was getting upset. His son can't hit a ball with the bat. And so my brother goes, I'm going to go outside and show my son how to play. He doesn't know baseball, but I want to show him how to hit that ball. And so my brother's wife said, no, Haneko's a sensitive kid, just leave him alone, he's having a good time out there. And my brother, being a good husband he was, or is, said okay, and stayed. And didn't bother Haneko in the backyard. So Haneko's still in the backyard, throwing the ball, swinging and missing, swinging and missing, swinging and missing. After a while, my brother's like, I can't take this anymore. My son cannot hit a ball. I need to show him how to hit the ball. So his wife said, just be kind to him. He's a sensitive child. He doesn't take criticism very well. So Kevin said, okay, I'll do that. And so he walked down to the backyard, and Haneko's still throwing the ball, swinging and missing, swinging and missing, swinging and missing. And he says, hey, Haneko, you want to go get some ice cream? And Haneko turns around to him and says, hold on a second, Dad, I'm throwing a no-hitter. Right, so I love the story, just knowing it's about family, but you had to have a cultural context, right, to understand the story. You had to understand sort of the rules of baseball to understand what was going on there. And when we talk about baseball, we talk about how many strikes does it take to get an out. This is the interactive part. How many? Three. Good. And how many balls for a walk?
4.
How far is it from home plate to first base?
90 feet.
How wide is home plate?
17 inches.
18 inches.
17.
And how far is it from home plate to left field?
Long way.
A long way. Depends on where you are, right? It depends on where you are. So as we had the very simple ideas of strikes and balls, the answers were pretty quick. Everyone knew that. But when you got to more specifics, it became more challenging. Let me ask you another question. How many ways is there to get on base in a game of baseball?
7.
7?
12.
12? There's actually 23 different ways to get on base. You have a walk, you have a single, a double, a triple, you have a home run. You also have archaic rules such as you make it on first base, there's a rain delay, the game is going to be played another day, the player that was on first base gets traded to another team and you have to replace that player onto first base, right? That's the way some of our grant rules work. Like, we had some issues where we took care of very specific situations within those rules, so we had to establish a new rule set. I was also reading a book recently about architecture, and there's 2 points of view on architecture. One point of view is that architecture is about the structure of and the beauty of the structure. And this is Nat Stadium. I'll be there Friday night, having a nice time. And you have the aesthetics of the building, but you also have the amenities of the building. You have the food stands, you have the plumbing, the other things that's going on. You have, if any of you ever go to Nat Stadium, there's a great ferry that goes from Alexandria to Nat Stadium. It's really cool to come up on the water up to the stadium and walk in. So it creates this structure, an imposing structure that you see, and there's an aesthetics to that. But does that really mean anything? So to these architects, where they talked about the structure, that was important, but to other architects, it was about the story. What about the story that's going on within that system? The fans that are there, the fact that there's different approaches to enjoying the game, and that within stadiums there's different cultures that are going on. So when we look at the structure of Nats Park, it doesn't really tell us anything, and that's a problem with the structure. We go to various baseball stadiums and you see different things. Like here's Red Sox Stadium with the Green Monster, Camden Yard with the warehouse being there, the Yankee Stadium with the lattice work, the Chicago Cubs, the Wrigley Field with the ivy in the field. All those have different structures, different approaches, but The foundation of all these is very similar. They all have a diamond. They all have a way of playing the game that is similar. And that is what the intention of the grant regulations were, to make uniform our approach. We're all unique snowflakes, right? But we all have a similar structure. And that is the intent of the new regulations. Also, another thing that's really interesting about the regulations that we don't talk about is, when we go to this first, a key task, architecture is about structure, it's about story, we need both to make it happen. Let's flip that to federal assistance. It's about structure, it's about story, and we need both to make it happen. And we have to always remember that beneficiaries do not appear in our structure. They don't appear in the grant agreements. Something else happened today 40 years ago. Star Wars was released, right? I was in middle school, and so I was overseas, so it wasn't until the next year that I actually made it over to England, but we had a field trip to go see Star Wars. I was sick that day, I never saw it, I didn't see it till about 4 years ago. So I was really behind in the, what's so fascinating about this, because the technology has changed so much with filmmaking, but it was a filmmaking class. And we were using filmmaking actually to improve our academic achievement in reading, math, science. I didn't know that I was actually a beneficiary of a grant program as a student there. My school was receiving a grant fund that my teacher had gone out and received to teach us about filmmaking, and at the same time tangentially teaching us about reading, math, science. So the beneficiaries don't always know that they're part of a Title I program, or a Title 10 program, or TANF, or whatever the program is. And that's important to remember. Those beneficiaries are receiving benefits, but they may not know it. Everybody's best friend, Gil Tran, found this years ago in a desk at OMB. This is 1950 Bureau of the Budget, which is now OMB. This is the fiscal year 1950 federal grants to states. $25 billion put out to states. $25 billion to states in 1950, the majority for public assistance. HHS, today, or last year, we awarded about 77,000 grants to about 11,000 different recipients. Approximately $462 billion went out the door from our department to support healthcare across the United States and research. 88% of that were entitlement grants. Universities and colleges represent 34 of the top 50 of our discretionary grant programs. 6 states received the largest amount of funds: California, New York, Texas, and so on. And NIH awarded about 43% of all awards. And when we look at the type of awards that we're doing, and again, this goes to the point about the structure that I was talking about with the baseball stadium, we have research, we have services, we have other, and we have training. Social services, health, demonstration projects. Apparently my time's going to be up pretty soon. So I'll speed up. So we have all those organizations putting out grant monies, and you see all the different operating divisions we have: NIH, CDC, HRSA, CMS, and so on. So it becomes very complicated very quickly on the type of grants that we're providing and the variety of grants that we provide. And within those grant-making operations, we have a variety of actors that are playing their roles within our grant-making. We have my division, the grants officers, program officers, cost allocation service is doing the indirect costs, the grants finance and administrative service, the payment management system, Office of Recipient Integrity and Coordination, Suspension Debarment Office, General Counsel, GSA, OMB, IG, GAO, all having to work in concert with each other to provide and perform these programs in a clear way. But when we dig deeper into each one of these organizations, tell me if you've ever seen any of these people. dramatic dentist who thinks everything's a crisis. Helpful Helen doesn't know what she's talking about, but offers plenty of suggestions. Aussie Barry loves telling you what to do. Talking Todd won't shut up. Intimidating Irene, you get the point. We have all these different types of personalities that we're trying to deal with also while we're trying to manage these grants. So you have these programs that have statutory authority that's been given to us to perform. You have all these variety of offices, and you have various personalities you're trying to work with at the same time. And the process at HHS is fairly fluid, and this shouldn't be a surprise to you. It's, you know, we do the announcement, we do the evaluation, negotiation, award, and so on. And we have various grant systems. This is on the non-research side. We have grants.gov, where you do plan, find, apply, grant solutions, where the performance reporting is going, and then you have business information through the tag system, which is reporting out to USA spending. All that creates this huge ball of concern. This is not rocket science, grant making, but sometimes it feels more difficult, doesn't it? Because you're dealing with those personalities. We've seen over the years some challenges from GAO and IG reports, uncoordinated grant program creation, need for better collaboration across agencies and within agencies, internal control weaknesses, lack of agency or recipient capacity, the inability to perform your grant programs. So we came to the table with this idea. You cannot solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. And so we came to a point when it was time to change. And that was about 6 years ago. And it was a lot like when I went on vacation a couple years ago to Chicago, and we decided that we were going to go up and visit the top of what used to be the Sears Tower. 102nd floor, 103rd floor. And you stand at the bottom and you look up at this long distance in the goal. And at the time, as you all know, we had 8 separate circulars, all similar but unique and different. And when we got into the room, and as you're preparing to go up to the 102nd floor, you walk into a lobby and they have this long winding line and they have all these definitions. That's where we were. It was a challenge to even think, how are we ever going to get to this goal of having a singular circular or singular guidance, uniform guidance? When we couldn't even come into a room and make a decision about what is the date of award. What is the date of award? Is it the date the grants officer signs it? Is it the date it was obligated in the financial system? Is it the date that the recipient countersigns it? We couldn't even speak the same language across agencies and even within agencies. And so we persisted and worked and we thought about what is the goal. And the goal was to streamline the regulations and strengthen the oversight of funds to reduce fraud, waste, and abuse. And we looked at this framework of how we're going to do that. We wanted consistency in policies and process. We wanted to have consistent policies and processes to support the administrative burden on recipients. In other words, to reduce their administrative burden. We wanted clarity in the financial program results. We wanted to ensure that we were getting the results that we had asked for when we designed the program. Remember that quote about strategic intent? That was our job, was to come up with strategic intent. And one of the great things about the design of the uniform guidance was we collaborated with all communities. We took input from everyone to design and put together that. It was at times it felt like we shouldn't do that, but it was the right thing to do to get that collaboration. So we made it to the 102nd floor, right? We looked out over, and when you look out over Chicago, it's beautiful. It's not like when you're on street level, right? It's a gorgeous city. That's the way I felt about the uniform guidance when it got passed 2 years ago, right? Simplistic. We had 3 sections plus appendices. Administrative requirements, cost principles, audit requirements. Simple, easy, fluid. Made sense. Discretionary grants and cooperative agreements are going to be awarded on merit. We're going to increase the focus on performance outcomes. We're going to have the rules governing the allocation of funds streamlined, right? Single audit tool. interesting thing is when we changed this and we got rid of the A133, I was in the single audit roundtable discussion, and we spent an hour and a half talking about what do we call ourselves now as auditors. We're not A133 auditors now because we're under the uniform guidance. So am I a single auditor? But if I'm a single auditor, that doesn't make sense because I'm not actually doing a single audit, I'm doing 2 audits. I'm auditing 2 things. So there's cracks in the system started coming. And we started to walk. So there's the ledge. You walk out onto in Chicago, and that's me, and this is my wife's shoes. With a lot of people comment that it's cute shoes. And what you don't know about this picture is that actually right next to me is 2 teenage boys jumping up and down to take selfies. So they're flying in the air. And it's intimidating. Mentally, I knew that there was a lot of engineering that went into this, and that there was a lot of safety and engineering to support. I'm a pretty big guy, but I'm sure it would support us. But it was hard to get around that concept to say, okay, I can step out there. So you just do this, and this is where we are with the uniform guidance, right? We created these structures to say, hey, look, this is easier. So this is a pre-award process. And now we have standard approach to announcing the NOFO, the Notice of Funding Opportunity. Should be on grants.gov. The applicants come find the award. We then take a panel and do a merit review. We evaluate. We do a risk assessment. It was intended to make things easier and simpler. And these slides are just trying to show you what the agency process and the recipient side are. And some of the significant reforms we had within that, as you all know, is a 60-day posting. Give the recipient more time to put together their applications. Agency must use OMB-approved forms for applications and information collection instead of their own types of forms. Changing the closeout requirements to 1 year to give agencies time to ensure that awards are closed out. Conflict of interest. They have to disclose in writing potential conflicts of interest. 10% de minimis rate. Applying a rate to allow for new recipients an opportunity to recover costs that they couldn't before. Raising the single audit threshold. Conducting a pre-award survey. The awarding agency must develop and implement a merit review process. And let the applicant know what the process is so that when they apply, they know what they're getting into and how they're going to be selected. All sounds great, doesn't it? Yeah. Another heavy focus of the grants reform was internal controls. Let's take a different approach, a different tack of saying, instead of becoming the compliance police, that we would actually look at reasonable assurance, that there's internal controls in place to protect our funds. Remember the good stewardship of the funds? We want to make sure that we're good stewards of funds, but we don't need to see every single receipt. We need to be assured that the organization has internal controls in place and that they use what we use in the federal government, either the COSO model or the OMB or the GAO Green Book. Within the Green Book, they have these 7 principles of internal controls, and one of those is risk assessment. Risk assessment, vitally important. And it wasn't a new concept. 1662. Fear of some harm ought to be proportional not only to the magnitude of the harm, but also the probability of the event. We talked about risk for years. You took a risk coming here today, right? Walking across the street and walking through this rain, there's a potential that you wouldn't be seen by a car, but you took the right precautions, right? You probably looked both ways, maybe took the iPods out of your earbuds. And the last time I said iPods, I actually said a Walkman and nobody knew what I was you take the iPod and look both ways and ensure that you're making it here safely. And also you took a risk of coming here that you would actually be given some information that would be useful. And I hope that at the end of the presentation you can say that. But they went through a similar process. Risk identification, assessment, response. Every recipient is to have this done for them. And then we look at different types of risks. So as we get more complex in our approach with risk assessments and more mature, we should be looking at strategic risk, operational risk, compliance risk, financial risk, reputational risk. What are all those risks that can occur? And the reason we put it in the pre-award stage is that it's the least cost to the taxpayer. But should risk assessment end at the pre-award stage? No, it should be something that continues on throughout the life cycle of the award. It should be an everyday part of the business process, and that is where I hope that we go in the future. We're continually looking at that. And that we're assessing the right things, right? Caution, this sign has sharp edges, do not touch the edge of the sign. Also, the bridge is out ahead, right? If we're not ensuring that we're looking at the right things and making an assessment of an organization, we are going to be in a world of trouble because things could happen that we have blind spots to. The only intention of a risk assessment is to raise our head so that we see clearly what's going on, so that we can take direct action. It's very similar to a study that was done several years ago about, I grew up in England, so I love soccer, or as I call it, football. You have penalty kicks and you have a goalkeeper. So you have a striker come up and he's supposed to kick the ball into the goal. And you have the goalkeeper there to prevent the ball from going into the goal. And in the study, they broke the goal into 3 sections: left, center, right. And they looked at which way does the striker typically kick the ball and which way does the goalkeeper typically go. And the goalkeeper typically went which way? Right?
His right.
Right, his right. And the penalty kicker typically kicked the ball where?
Left.
Left.
Oh.
So it was actually to the center. The penalty kicker typically kicked the ball to the center. And the reason that they saw this is that there's peer pressure from the crowd. So you have to be reactive, right? You have to react to the situation. So the goalkeeper is going to move one way or the other. If the goalkeeper didn't react and actually took a second or a split second to think about where the hips are moving and what the push of the ball was, they would actually save more goals. So it's really interesting that the actual goals are down the center and not to the right or left. And that is something that we have an issue with within government. We are excellent within government at risk events. If there is a hurricane disaster or a requirement for the GAO comes in and gives a report, or the IG gives a report, we pool our resources and resolve an issue fairly quickly and seamlessly. But when it becomes the routine day-to-day processes, we seem to take our time sometimes and not make the right decisions, because maybe potentially it's because of the less pressure on the day-to-day operations. So a risk assessment is supposed to give us that opportunity to take a pause and see if the ball's actually coming straight at us. Also, when the regulations came out, every agency had to codify the regulations. For instance, HHS codified, we put our regulations out. Well, we actually modified some of the regulation so that it's not always uniform across all agencies. And our instance is that instead of the 1 year, the 455 days that's in the uniform guidance for closeout, we actually give 270 days altogether for our agency to close out an award. And that was to ensure that they get done in a timely fashion. So you have the uniform guidance that was applied, then you have these other things going on. One very important thing is the presidential management agenda. Federal agencies are managing programs and delivering critical services more effectively, developing greater percentage of taxpayer dollars to mission achievement rather than costly, unproductive compliance activities. And all these are supported by our regulations, right? We intended to move away from a compliance approach to a risk-based approach and to reduce administrative burden on programs. So the management agenda is really important. You should read it. There's some clarifying language within those agendas. The Data Act, providing greater transparency to the public. That was a great movement forward for the agencies. And at HHS, this was tremendous in the fact, remember I was saying about how grants people got together, we couldn't speak the same language, put together grants, contracts, budget, and finance people together, and you really don't have a way of speaking. When we said obligation, they had a different idea of what obligation was. And we found we were talking past each other. One of the great things about the Data Act was it actually got us to speak the same language. So all this synergy of being able to speak and conduct or break down the silos between the different types of organizations has been a wonderful outcome of the Data Act. ERM, you all should be aware of ERM and the new requirement within A123 requirements for agencies. We developed an ERM playbook last year to talk about the process, and within that we created what we call the honeycomb, where we are establishing risk, and this is a risk assessment is at the entity level, the agreement level. ERM is to look at the totality of a program and to see how the enterprise is managing and maintaining the risk. We also have the GONE Act. Everybody familiar with the GONE Act? Okay, so the GONE Act is, it was passed into law last year. All federal agencies are going to have to submit a report through HHS in consultation with OMB on how many grants that they still have open in their payment systems that are more than 2 years past the end of the period of performance. And for the top 30 oldest grants, you have to give an explanation of why they're open. And some of those reasons we've seen are things that the new regulations do not address, like disconnection between the grants management system and the payment system. So the regulations give a framework. They give the rule set, but they don't necessarily tell you procedurally how you're going to play the game. So, some of the positive changes we've seen from the new regulations. And it's really difficult to make broad assumptions yet. With the single audits, this year we're just getting the first audits coming in right now about the implementation of the regulations. So in the next few months, we're going to maybe be able to see some trending data from the financial audits of organizations to see if the new regulations are working well. But one of the things that was a positive change with the regulations was a common language. We all now have 99 definitions that are put into the regulations, and now we know what the date of award is. We know what an organization is. Common approach. That slide I showed you earlier where we outlined in the NOFO specific requirements, that's become common. What goes into a notice of award is common. It's outlined in the regulations. Those are really important things, especially to our recipient community and applicant community, so that they understand what to expect when they receive a grant. And one day, hopefully, we move towards a sort of common terms and conditions across so that people have an understanding of what that burden is. Risk assessment. This new discussion about risk has been very helpful for agencies to really think about, why am I giving funds to this organization when they've not been successful in the past, where they have audit findings. The renewed focus on outcomes. Within the regulations, the discussion about outcomes and driving of outcomes is very, very positive. Now it becomes the challenging part of actually implementing those outcomes. How do you develop outcomes that are measurable and that fit the requirements of your specific programs? As a matter of fact, how do we define program? That's always been a challenge across the government. Focus on internal controls instead of being assured that all requirements have been met, that you have a reasonable assurance that things have been completed and that they have systems in place. risk-based approach versus compliance focus. The diminished rate has been good. And the cultural change, that there's actually been discussion about the structure and how you administer a program. Within agencies, you get programs talking about what does this new uniform guidance mean? How do I utilize it? And if we can drive away from using the regulations as a policy of no to a policy of I have plenty of opportunity to work within this framework, a policy of yes, we're going to be better off. These policies are broad enough and bright enough that you could actually do a lot of things that you couldn't do before. So some of the challenges that we've seen, and it's easier for government people to talk about challenges than it is for the positive change. Fixed amount awards. My experience with fixed amount awards has been that it's a challenge for programs and staff to understand how does this enhance my ability to perform? How does this enhance the ability of the program? And a fixed amount award is essentially the equivalent of a fixed price contract. You go to Best Buy, you go to buy a laptop. When you go to buy a laptop, do you ask how much the keys cost, how much the internal components of that laptop cost, how much the extension cord costs are? This is the part where you talk to me. Since nobody's asking questions. No, you don't ask it. You go, is it the right price? And does it have the functionality that I expect? Does it have the speed and the functions? And does it have the Wi-Fi? Does it have the built-in camera? And so on. That's what you're concerned about, the outcome of that purchase. That's what a fixed amount award is. You have programs that consistently over years have provided the same amount of funding to the same type of programs or same types of organizations. There's an opportunity here to use the fixed amount award, give them a fixed price, and then really strategically focus your efforts on, are they giving you what you expected? Downstream policy, procedures, and forms. This is a huge challenge for a department like HHS as well as other agencies. You have the regulations, which had a huge push to put in, but then you had all these departmental policies, optive or bureau policies, you had procedural documents, you had forms that reference the old documents, you had terms and conditions, you had systems that use the old terminology. And that takes time to sort of clean out. So it's been 2 years now, and we're still going through the process of doing that. Once you finish something, there's usually that deep breath of, wow, we accomplished something. And then the realization, oh my, we still have a lot more to do to get to where we need to be. So it becomes a challenge, and there could potentially be a liability. Training awareness on federal and recipient side. We focused on getting the regulations out. It was a challenge to focus on actually training people on what these new regulations meant. Not only on the government side, but also on the recipient applicant side. So you had organizations like Management Concepts working on trying to get those, trying to understand what the new regulations are and how do you put that into a training class and how do you get people to move away from the old ideas, because a lot of the ideas within the uniform guidance are only a 2 or 3 degree change in view. It's almost the exact same thing. When we were going through the regulation, I was at Department of State. Jeff Bell in the back will know that I sat with every grants officer, every chief grants officer and program person and read the draft regulations to them, like a storybook. And it led to a lot of conversations. And there was a lot of times while we were reading the draft regulations and we said, wow, that's crazy. Why are we doing that? And then we looked at the current regulations. We said, oh, that's why we're doing it, because it's in the current regulations. There was an awareness that we didn't have before of some of these items that had gotten lost. Remember, like the 23 ways to get on base and the player that gets traded and a rain delay. We forgot about some of those things that we should have been doing or weren't aware of what the implications of those were. So training awareness has been a huge challenge to get out there and to make people aware of how to do that, using webinars, using classroom training, using fly sheets or one-pagers. The application of the cost principles. The interpretation of what the cost principles actually mean now. And again, the cost principles provide us wide application, wide ability to utilize. And they're not to be narrowly defined except for things like buying alcohol. That's definitely enough. But you have a new requirement for timesheet reporting. You can do it differently than just signing off on a timesheet. But how do you implement that? How do you get that to a place where an organization can utilize that process? Sub-recipients. We did a great job of actually sort of defining what it was, but then it wasn't so good. People are still questioning, what is that? Maybe it needs further refinement, further definition. Procurement standards, we just increased or allowed for the waiver to go for another year for the procurement standards, but trying to understand what that means, how do you utilize procurement standards. The cultural change. It was a positive thing that there was language, but there was also a cultural change of, oh my, what is going on? Does this make sense, and does this affect my programs? And then there's the question of frequently asked questions. So all these cultural changes, all these questions that came out about procurement standards, contractor, minimus rates, single audits. We used frequently asked questions through the COFAR that we put out, 38 pages of Q&A. Vitally important for the community to have an understanding what our interpretation was of the regulations. But what happens to those facts? They are not regulation. They are just guidance. So how do you incorporate that into? And what we've seen, and it'll be interesting when we review the single audits, is that some auditors have said, we don't see the facts as being valid interpretation. It is what is in the regulation. So it's going to be interesting to see where we fall with the facts and what we do with the facts in the future. I think they're a valuable tool. How are we using them to ensure compliance? Any questions about any of that? Does anybody have any different ideas of challenges that we've seen with the regulations? That's brilliant. Don't ask any questions. So one of the major focuses of the regulations, and this is where it's a real cultural shift, and I haven't seen this shift completely, is program planning. That we should be spending more time focusing on the development of our objectives and the development of our programs where we have the ability to do that.
May I ask a question there, since you see the one question? My theory was the Data Act would allow you to say, where are all the places a similar program or program purpose might be being pursued? For example, by different HHS opt-ins with their different grants respectively. And then to look across them and say, well, if these three different opt-ins are pursuing the same sort of mission purpose, let me look across and see if they can learn lessons from each other or build on each other's success, or perhaps if there's duplication.
Yeah.
So my question is, does it look to you like the Data Act's allowing you to do that at this point from the HHS level?
So we intend to, that's the direction we want to go in. Right now it's in its infancy, we just had the first reporting, so just getting the alignment of the finance, budget, contracts was our focus. Now, how do we use that for data analytics? How do we do that to do predictive analytics? How do we do that to ensure that that programs are not duplicative or that they're complementary of each other in a specific area or region? So it's sort of this systems grant-making approach.
Actually, may I also ask if you could repeat the question so the live stream viewers can hear also. And one follow-on, which is, do the different opt-divs within HHS get to each define what their programs are? In which case, might it not be a challenge to figure out where are the real similar programs?
Yeah, so the question was about the Data Act and the utility of the Data Act and whether that's being used to ensure that we don't have duplication of programs or to magnify a program to improve its results. And also to look at whether the various opt-divs are utilizing or coordinating their events and using the statutory authorities. That is an area that we need to move. to improve upon and move forward, and that's part of why these core questions, I think, that will help with that answer. And so some of the core questions that we should be asking, not only at the program level, but also in HHS at the optic level or even the departmental level, is does our grant making align with our intentions? Does the grants we're making align with the intention of the purpose? Are our grants structured to be successful? And do they complement what our needs are? Are we efficient in our internal processes? Are we using the internal processes to define where we're going? Are we communicating effectively, not only internally, but also externally to our recipient and applicant communities? And does our process strengthen and support the grantees? The grantees and the recipients are the lifeblood of our agencies and of our grant-making process. So everything we're doing should be supporting them to perform at the highest level. And I think of some of the additional questions when I'm thinking about this program planning, this decision to be making these programs. And this is where, I'll talk about it in a second, program offices and grants offices have to be further upstream with each other. Effective programs are not accidental. They're deliberate, well-conceived, and well-executed. We have to think through that. You have to gather knowledge and identify needs before awarding. I know in the past we've pulled out the notice of funding opportunity from the prior year, dusted it off, reposted the same award without updating, without looking at the outcomes of the prior awards that were closing at that period of time. So taking an opportunity to relook at the way we do our program, looking at maybe doing the branding, braiding approach to grant making also. Are we clear about the results that we seek to achieve? We say a lot of times just, we expect 100% improvement in reading scores for an education grant. Does that make sense? I don't know. We need to be very clear and specific on who we're serving and what our expectations are of the applicant community. We need to take appropriate risks and mitigate residual risks. So we need to be innovative. And one of the areas that I'll talk about in a few minutes is the opportunity that innovation, when you become more structured, we become less innovative. So how do you ensure that there's innovative grant making that is taking a risk for the agency to perform? And carefully direct the resources to maximize influence and impact. For instance, formula happiness. There it is. Right? It's really simple. Rewards alone are not the best predictor of happiness. The most powerful predictor of happiness is whether or not people's expectations related to the rewards were exceeded. And happiness is a state that reflects not how well things are going, but instead where things are going better than expected. So we know kind of what happiness is. We've defined it. And this is actually, it is a mathematical formula for happiness. And it comes into 5 points to look at to measure happiness. One is if you have meaningful relationships. You have a meaningful relationship with your family, friends. Are you mindful? Do you notice small things? Do you sniff the roses when you walk past them? Continuing to learn, continuing to grow as a person, and to learn about your environment. Exercise, something I need to remember. Exercise, getting out, moving the body, thinking about the full body, and random acts of kindness. And this is the formula to happiness. Such a nebulous term, right? Happiness. Everybody kind of interprets it their own way, but here's actually 5 key points to happiness. So if we can measure happiness, why can't we measure all of our programs? And why can't we look at a bureau or look across a department and say, what is that greater measurement? Or have a common measurements within a grant program, not only to measure the programmatic success, but also the financial or fiscal approach. Okay? So, some of my thoughts about the guidance and maybe where we're going. Yogi Berra, if anybody knows who he is. So actually, here's another fact of today. I used to be a high school teacher, so today was actually the day that the great Babe Ruth hit his last home run, 714. He's from the great city of Baltimore, although he went to Boston and New York, but he did play for the Baltimore team for a while. But Yogi Berra, who had always had great quotes, and I thought I'd share some of those. If you don't know where you're going, you might end up someplace else, right? This is an area that we need to work on within the grants community. We need that intentional alignment of grant management to support our strategic goals. And our grants administrators should be embedded early in the strategic decision process, so really upstream. I know a lot of grants offices have felt that every decision on the development of the program has been made, and then the applicants dropped in their lap and said, award this grant to this organization, right? And then all of a sudden you realize, whoa, you didn't put X, Y, and Z into the announcement. You didn't ensure that they were done in quality, and so on. So you need to have sort of this strategic embedding early in the process, so you become part of the process, because we are the strategic decision makers. You can observe a lot just by watching, right? All that data we collect, we should be a data hub for business intelligence. We have systems in place where we can use business analytics. Can we use information like the single audits and do predictive analysis from that? Can we look at the collection of performance data? Can we look at financial data to make some determinations about an organization? Can we determine fraud that may be occurring with the recipients if we look at the first 90 days of drawdown, and whether they're drawing down large amounts or they're drawing down zeros or whatever it may be? So using the data we have available to make good business intelligence decisions. And move us away from just being a transactional piece of the process. Grants offices for many years have been just a transaction. Sign this piece of paper, let me get the grant going, and don't talk to me afterwards. All right? Until I need you when an issue occurs. So moving away from transactional, becoming part of the strategic decision process. Pair up in threes, another great quote. Pair up in threes. Separation of duties and a deliberate cross-functional structure. There still needs to be separation of duties. There needs to be clear cut within the government and also within organizations of what the separation duties are, and a deliberate cross-functional structure that actually speaks to and talks to and enhances each other. When I was at state, we had a grant that I was grants officer to. We had a single audit that came in, and keep me straight on time, please. We were awarding the grant. The business process within the office was said, don't look at the single audits, just file them into the folder and move on. I said, well, let me look at the audit. And I looked at the audit, and within that audit, there was in the boxes, it just said other. And I was like, so there was findings on this audit report. I didn't know what it meant. I looked to see what other was, so I pulled up the full audit report. I look at the recommendations. There's several recommendations, and within that, within one of the recommendations, it said a defalcation occurred. And I didn't know what defalcation meant, so I looked it up, and it was an embezzlement of funds. So I said, oh, this is a concern now. Yeah. So we went to investigate this organization, and they did not have clear separation of duties within the organization. And they also did not have good quality internal controls, in the fact that the person that was the CFO of this organization had a nursing degree, which is great, but then never had an accounting class. she had disappeared from her job, and she was very good at record keeping. So she did keep all the receipts of everything she did, and for 2 years she'd been paying her fiance as a shadow employee. She had paid for her wedding through federal funds, including purchasing an H2 Hummer, which isn't a wise economic choice, I guess, but she had done all this and she had disappeared. But the utilization of that data, if we had not actually physically looked into the audits, we would never have found that. And being able to see that she had done something unintentional, and the auditors felt that they had done their due diligence by submitting to the Federal Audit Clearinghouse. They felt that they didn't have to actually report to the IG. So now we have in the new regulations, you must submit to the government immediately. But it was interesting, and it was also interesting that the person had disappeared, and the IG called me about a year later and said, "Hey, we found the person." And I was like, "Oh yeah, where'd you find her? Was she in Hawaii or on an island someplace?" And they go, "No, she was in PG County Jail already for in a prior position." Yeah. So it happens. And we just need to be aware. But there's lots of data and lots of ability to use that to support.
We have an online question, someone who, it was probably related to one of the previous slides, but it says, how does HHS deal with kind of unforeseen events? Are there any ways to deal with it other than the urgent grant process?
So by unforeseen events, we're talking about the actual grant process, or
I
we're
think
talking
it's
about?
if a grantee has an unforeseen event.
Right.
I assume they think they need more money, or they think that something has gone wrong. I don't know for sure.
Right. So if there's an unforeseen event where we're actually, it's not sort of grant fraud, waste and abuse, where it's just an unforeseen event where they need additional funds to take care of an issue, that is just, it's structurally set up so that they can come in and request those funds or deal with it that way.
So they just work with their project
Work with
officer?
their project officer and the grants officer. It's like deja vu all over again. We need to move away from being the compliance police. How many times have we gone to an organization and we've done a checklist? Is this box checked correctly? Is that box checked correctly? Instead of looking at the internal controls and looking for reasonable assurance. Senior leadership engagement. One of the things that we've done at HHS with the change of the administration is actually brief out our new staff coming in on what is grant making and what is the grant administration, what is the process for that, to assist them with their strategic planning. So they need to understand what the rules of the road are for that engagement. We make too many wrong mistakes.
Can I ask another question there? People think about in the credit card industry, well, presumably they're not losing more than about 0.5% or 1% of the credit card transactions for fraud. And so therefore you think, well, if we've got 100 million transactions, we might have a $500,000 loss. It's worth spending some money to go after that on compliance. Presumably it's not worth spending $3 million. I don't know for sure, but is there any sort of rule of thumb you think that would be worth pursuing in terms of kind of how much money to put into compliance?
Yeah, so this is an area that we're looking at with the new ERM requirement. That is what we're looking to see is, can we build in a sort of ERM risk management profile and then mitigation strategy. So we're looking at what is that leveling to go look at information, what is the dollar value for closing out grants and ensuring that we've received all the applications, and if they're an old grant, should we close those out? Should we just, what should we do with those based on certain thresholds? So we're exploring that, but we don't have the thresholds.
As a follow-up to that, versus compliance, would you say management? Because if you manage the grant, and I did put my quarterly report, I would already know that something was wrong that I could address, versus waiting to the end of closeout.
Correct.
To do the subsequent compliance.
Correct. So it's all about management, and the compliance police is the approach that we take. But some agencies, focus on the outcome of the program and not say, look at, did every form get submitted exactly correctly, and every T and I was crossed and dotted. Okay.
Thank you.
We made too many wrong mistakes. Professionalization of the federal assistance workforce. This is an area that needs a lot of work in building a professional workforce. Contracts has had a professional workforce for many, many years. With certifications, we don't have that type of training. Most agencies are requiring or looking at third-party providers, contractors to provide that training. There's pockets of trainings that occur, but to have a strong structure so that even within HHS, a HRSA grants officer gets a job at CDC. CDC may not be fully aware, and this is no talk about, but the differences between CDC and HRSA may be vastly different in what the training needs of that is. And if you go outside of the agency, if you're pulling in a grants officer from transportation, EPA, State Department, you don't know what the level of training they receive because there's no certification. You only know from what they talk about on the resume. So you could actually be spending a year training up someone to be able to manage and maintain your programs. One of the good things about the regulations is that we've sort of laid the foundation for a similar approach. If the world were perfect, it wouldn't be. Aim for reasonable rather than absolute assurance. Consistency in statutory authority and utilization of regulations. So one of my dreams is that we have consistency in statutory authorities. That every statutory authority has some unique thing to the statutory authorities where they're asking for specific reporting. It would be helpful, I think, for all of us if we sort of had a framework that allowed for consistency in the way the statutory authorities were done and how we utilize the regulations. And some take a strict interpretation of the regulation and others take a more lax interpretation. So I think it would be helpful for the recipient community if we all interpret the regulations and utilize the regulations in the same manner. So just to close out, just a couple helpful tidbits that I've collected over the years for grants administrators. One is always tell your story. You have a story to tell, and that's your grant document, your grant record, the grant agreement. And it tells a story of how we came to deciding what our priority was, what the strategic intent was, how we selected someone, why we selected them, what they did during the process, and then what was the outcomes that occurred, and how do we tell that story again, or reinvigorate the story and change the story. But always tell your story, always be able to say what's going on. Do all the work up front. The more time you spend doing that strategic development, the risk assessment, the selecting the right organizations, not just necessarily the organizations that always perform the duties or the work for you, goes a long way to ensuring that there's not trouble down the road. Question, question, question. Always question everything. It's like the 5 whys, right? Everybody knows the 5 whys?
Why?
Right, the 5 whys. Right. It's like, the Washington Monument. The Washington Monument years ago, the facade was cracking and breaking, and so the Department of Interior, that runs the National Park Service, looked and said, well, what's going on with the Washington Monument? So they went in, they looked, and they reviewed it, and they said, hey, the problem with the facade is that there's really harsh chemicals being used to wash the Washington Monument. And they said, okay, well, why are we using harsh chemicals on the Washington Monument? Well, there's a lot of pigeons and birds flying around the Washington Monument that are doing their thing, and that requires us to use these harsh chemicals to clean the Washington Monument. And they said, oh, that's interesting. So why are there a lot of pigeons flying around the Washington Monument? Well, there's tourists that leave a lot of trash, and there's a lot of spiders on the Washington Monument. Why would there be spiders on the Washington Monument? It's a flat facade. Well, we built the Washington Monument in the city of DC on a swamp, right? So there's a lot of bugs and gnats that are food for the spiders to catch. So they have all these spider webs to catch the gnats. And the gnats, the spiders eat the gnats, the birds eat the spiders, the birds do their thing, and then we have to use really harsh chemicals to wipe off the Washington Monument. Okay, so why are there a lot of bugs flying around on the Washington Monument? Well, we use really, really bright lights to light up the monument at night, right? So, and we're built on a swamp, so you're getting to the root cause. What is the real reason that you have these issues? And so you use less bright halogen lights, maybe turn them on later, which should reduce the number of bugs, and you know, taking care of the trash cans and making sure the trash is removed in an appropriate manner. Looking at the system, the ecosystem around the Washington Monument so that we don't have to use the harsh chemicals which causes the facade to crack and break. So the 5 whys. Teamwork. Like I discussed at the beginning, there's a lot of people involved in this process and they need to be all engaged in communicating and have a separation of duties. Taking risks and reliable risks. As government employees, there's a risk aversion. We like guarantees of success, but nothing in life is a guarantee. There's no program that we have that is guaranteed for success. But we need to be able to take that risk, but have the appropriate supports so that it's a safe for us. Get your ducks in a row. Always be prepared for that review that may be coming, or the questions that may be coming from outside review organizations. And finally, I just love this. This is from the National Archives. The details matter even when you travel the moon. This is from Buzz Aldrin. This is his travel voucher to the moon. So he left Cape Canaveral, he went to the moon, he landed in the Pacific Ocean, and he went to Hawaii, and he filled it out within 5 days of coming back to the moon to recover his $35 for his travel expenses. So I know that goes against what I was talking about with compliance, but I just find it fascinating that this gentleman took the time to, and I just imagine, you know, because there's an authorization number here, like the authorizer is going, I don't know if you actually went to the moon. Do you have a receipt? Anyway, so. Anyways, any questions, comments? Brilliant, that's what I wanted. Thanks so much.
So I do.
Oh, darn.
I do have one question, which is maybe sounds a little bizarre, but is perhaps I think applicable to other agencies. You at HHS at the department level have kind of a responsibility for compliance police, planning, strategy, a variety of other things. And it's pretty clear, I think, that the new administration is interested in getting more money to grantees and less money on regulation, less money to a certain extent on compliance and so forth. How do you reconcile kind of what are the roles of the department level versus the operating divisions like FDA or CDC? And where is it that kind of your responsibility ends and the operating division's responsibility starts for making sure their grants are made well and overseen appropriately and in compliance?
Yeah, so the question is about the structure of HHS and how policy flows down to the working level and how does that work. So we have the overall regulations that guide all HHS grantees, so our and program offices. So those regulations are the overarching umbrella. And then we have our overarching department regulation or policy guidance that it gives us. It's called the GPAM. And then within each OPTIP, depending on the size of the OPTIP, they may have a policy shop in there to interpret their statutory authorities and their policies within that broad umbrella we've already developed through the regulations in the GPAM. And then that flows down, and typically, currently, the OPTIPs take care of their training and awareness of those requirements.
Any other questions?
Regarding program, and when we looked at your core questions, what happens when you get to the no's? The program was subsequently developed 20 years ago under those variables, but now I'm doing that reassessment, and what happens in those core questions when you go, it's not doing this, it's not doing this, it's not doing that?
So I think that's where, so the senior leadership understanding of what the requirements are, and to really take another look at the programs, because right now we're identifying programs that are not successful, and what do we do with those programs, how do we approach that? So it's really the engagement with senior leadership of having an understanding of what we are expecting the outcomes to come from, and then getting to the point of having those early discussions. And the challenge is, of course, with the question of no, when it's coming from the program saying, no, we want to keep our program the same, is leveraging the fact that, hey, we need to have strong, supportable data that creates good outcomes and is good stewardship of the federal funds. And you have some data sets there to show whether there was actually an outcome to the program. If there's not an outcome to the program, why are we continuing to do it? Maybe the no is there is no need to do it because it really is not showing any results for the American public. And we have to keep our focus on the beneficiary. That's why I put that slide up about the beneficiaries, because the beneficiaries are the true reason why we do this. We don't do this to create a structure or to have an octave or a bureau. The purpose that we do these programs is to support some service that needs to be provided to the American public. And as long as we keep that focus in mind, I think that we can get past that no question. It's a huge challenge.
Thank you very, very much, Jeff. This was great. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And thank you all for being here, both present and online, and I hope you got something out of today. And I hope we'll see you again at our next one, which will be in mid-September. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Great.
Would it be possible to get, just let me see when you're